Star Wars: The Imperial March by Benjamin Chanes, music 1799. Before we begin, I wanted to give some background information prior to the actual analysis of the piece. The Imperial March was composed by John Williams. It was first released on April 29th, 1980. The piece appeared in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. The Imperial March is commonly referred to as a leitmotif because it is a song associated with a particular character, in this case, Darth Vader. The time signature of the piece is common time, also known as 4/4. The meter, because it is 4/4, is known as simple quadruple. The tempo is moderato with approximately 104 beats per minute. The key signature stays consistent throughout, staying as G minor. Because it is minor, it gives that dark, gloomy feel in order to represent the Empire, the bad guys, and Darth Vader. The dynamics, the piece starts off MP mezzo piano, also known as half soft. It progressively gets louder. When it transitions, it gets softer, and then ultimately it ends in forte, also known as loud. The form of the Imperial March is theme and variations. The opening, it will be referred to as A, and A will be consistently repeated with slight variations known as A1, A2, A3, etc. And they all go back and return to a very slight variation form of the opening A theme. The melody is disjunct. There are several movements in large intervals. I will definitely make note of the different types of ranges that we see and the large leaps that are ultimately resolved with half steps. The theme, as the key is in G minor and has some chromaticism throughout, the piece moves melodically downward just to give that dark and gloomy feeling to it. John Williams implements a strong use of dissonance. By using dissonance and not having that full feeling of resolution, it gives a so-called fearful, gloomy, dark kind of sound and feel to the piece, which is perfect to characterize Darth Vader. Lastly, my copy of the Imperial March is piano, which is treble and bass clef, but usually this piece is performed with a full orchestra with a particular emphasis on the brass. Now it's time for the analysis of the piece. We begin with moderato, common time, mezzo piano, everything the same that we described. G minor key. The beginning phrase that is repeated 4 times, the bam, bam, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, bum. That is going to be a rhythmic motif that is repeated all throughout the piece. It has very much of a militaristic triplet characteristic of marching being established. This F sharp right here, after the G's have been repeated, shows an E flat, F sharp, and B flat, which is a G minor chord. This dissonance here in F sharp has no resolution. Everything so far here has a very dark and gloomy perspective because of it is written in the key of G minor. This is all the quote-unquote exposition. Although it's not a sonata, it definitely is the introduction, and it is the initial A theme and the theme and variations of this piece. As we move on to the main component of the theme A that is going to be repeated several times throughout with slight variations, we begin with a G minor triad of a G, B flat, and D. We move on and we see that in these two measures, the bam, 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 ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, this right here, we see this consecutive downward motion coming in between these two measures. Once again, we see an E flat minor triad with an E flat, G flat, and a B flat. This repeated rhythmic pattern is going to be seen all throughout. As we move forward is the exact same thing as before, the G minor triad and an E flat minor triad. As we move forward though, there's a slight variation right here with a G flat being added. This G flat is not actually in the key of G minor, which it destables the leading tone as This is not an actual scale of G minor. As we move forward, we see this kind of change as a massive leap between this G here and this G here, a leap of an octave right here. And we see that it leaps downwards both ways of an octave in length. This octave in length leap definitely shows a sense of power, kind of like Darth Vader, very deep, bad, exactly what John Williams was trying to entail by going with the G minor chord, key, excuse me. To continue on from this octave leap that gave this sense of power to portray Darth Vader, I want to draw your attention to this half step down, downward motion that we have right here. This half step down definitely has a sense of strain and control to it. We have this sort of trail coming over here until we later on have this small leap that is ultimately resolved in a downward stepwise motion. As we continue forward, we have this notable just forward motion throughout, just this parallel forward motion. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to this measure right here. This right here with all these flats right here is a D flat minor triad. It has initially a downward motion preceding it, and it is made up of a D flat, F flat, and an A flat. Here, as this theme A continues on, I want to draw your attention down here where there are no more 16th or 8th notes repeating here. It definitely shows a sense of rest and a sense of transition towards a new theme or a slight variation to the original theme. Over here, we definitely have a crescendo where we are anticipating the piece to get louder. This ascending motion definitely draws a sort of transition-like feel from one theme to a slightly different variation of a new theme. We have a G minor chord triad like we did earlier in the piece. Definitely we are in a new theme, in a new transition now. We're in a new development phase. We are back to PP, which will be played extremely softly in the orchestra. We transition forward. This measure I wanted to draw your attention in particular. There is some significant leaps here that are not resolved with a stepwise fashion. Slowly, the piece is getting louder in this development phase. Another crescendo there. We're getting louder. Now we're at mezzo piano, where we initially started the piece. I say here that we are definitely transitioning to a climax back to the original theme. And John Williams is just bringing us through, and he's developing the sort of character, the sort of portrayal of the dark side of Darth Vader. So I recorded here that there's two kind of big range separations between the notes here in the treble clef. They're definitely greater than 8, which we should stay away from that, but I definitely wanted to draw your attention to that. Definitely we're getting louder. Here in the orchestra piece here, the trombones would be playing, and they would kind of attack in a very loud forward motion, kind of taken away from this softer where the violins and flutes would be playing to back to the evil, gruesome aspect of Darth Vader. We are definitely transitioning back to the original theme. Back over here, we have this little kind of squiggle right here. What is the arpeggiated chord? It's kind of like a spread out where it's kind of like a chromatic playing of consecutive notes in a very quick fashion. Definitely wanted to make note of that. We continue going through. It's solely repetition of what we've already analyzed. And what happens here is we definitely are going back to the original theme A. John Williams does this and draws suspense with dissonance by playing the original bum bum ba-da-dum ba-da-dum bum, and he plays this repeated, and then what he does is he increases it by a half step which ultimately anticipates the return to the original theme. But by doing this, it is unresolved. He ultimately resolves this unresolution, if you want to call it, by returning back to the original theme A, and now we're finally in the so-called resolution type phase. This is the exact same analysis as the first 16 measures of the piece. As we continue forward, there's a definitely increased range of notes. John Williams definitely brought this up an octave from G here to G up here. There's a slight variation in theme A. Like I said, this piece is strictly analytical on the first 16 pieces, and there are slight variations throughout. And honestly, what happens here is the top note here is brought up to a higher, the range is increased, and it is brought to a higher octave. We continue on with the exact same things, and we repeat these two measures here, and we're finally in the resolution, and we're kind of in what I call the kind of coda ending piece where the finale is presented forward. The main melody is repeated again. Here we have in the bass clef a descending fashion, which this descending form definitely gives tension to the piece. It continues with the G minor, dark, gloomy feel to it. The ascending notes here are just eager to finish and conclude this masterful piece by John Williams, and he does this by, where we finish here, he does this by this ascending motion where we have this almost fully chromatic. We're missing some sharps and flats, but this fully chromatic starting in the bass with just triplets everywhere and then going all the way through the treble clef, and with this crescendo just ending in triple forte, where it's the ending and conclusion to a perfectly dark piece with a militaristic march type of resolution to the ending. All right, that is my interpretation of the Imperial March by John Williams. Thank you.